October 3, 1892. In the quiet, working-class suburb of Redfern, Sydney, a health inspector's routine investigation into a blocked drain was about to become anything but routine. The ground was soft. Too soft. And the smell, it wasn't sewage. It was something else entirely. With each shovelful of dirt, the truth began to emerge. Not one, but two, then three, then more. Tiny bodies, wrapped in cheap cloth, buried in the shallow, muddy soil of the backyard at 25 Loomis Street. This was not a crime of passion. It was a business. A systematic, cold-blooded enterprise of murder. And its architect was a middle-aged, outwardly ordinary woman named Sarah Makin. To understand how Sarah Makin operated, you must first understand the world she preyed upon. Sydney in the 1890s was a city of brutal contradictions. Economic depression gripped the nation. And for women, especially unmarried mothers, widows, or the simply destitute, a pregnancy could mean social ruin and absolute poverty. Into this desperation stepped a solution, advertised plainly in the classifieds. Couple will care for healthy baby, terms £5 and 10 shillings a week. It was a baby farm. A grim, open secret. A place where mothers, with no other options, could pay someone to take their child, often with the unspoken understanding that the infant would not survive long. Sarah Makin, with her husband John, was a master of this trade. She presented herself as a kind, matronly figure. A solution. But behind that facade was a chillingly efficient business model. The payment was the goal. The child was merely a liability to be disposed of. The Makins were nomadic. They would rent a cheap house, often in a different suburb, place their advertisement, and take in as many babies as they could. They would stay just long enough to collect the initial payments, then, as the money dried up or suspicions grew, they would vanish in the night. And they always left something behind. The house on Loomis Street was just one in a long line. But it was here, finally, that their luck ran out. The new tenants complained of a foul smell and a blocked drain. And when the health inspector, concerned about a potential health hazard, started digging in that small backyard, he uncovered a nursery of the dead. 13 infants. Their bodies stacked in the earth like forgotten secrets. The press went into a frenzy. The public was horrified. The Loomis Street horror, they called it. But for the police, the most terrifying question was this all of them? The Makins were arrested quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. But how do you prosecute a crime of this scale? With no witnesses to the murders, the method was key. The coroner determined the babies had been starved, neglected, or drugged with soothing syrups, laced with opium, a common, and often lethal, pacifier of the era. The police soon realized the house on Loomis Street was just the final ledger in a long, grim accounting. They began tracing the Makins' movements backwards. And at their previous residences, the story repeated itself. At their previous home in Bund Street, they found 3 more bodies. In George Street, another 2. By the end of the exhumations, the official count was at least 18. But the true number? Many historians and investigators believe Sarah and John Makin were responsible for the deaths of over 30 infants. This would make Sarah Makin one of the most prolific serial killers in history. At trial, the strategy was simple. To secure a conviction, the prosecution focused on a single, identifiable child.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this simple piece of cloth is the key evidence in this case.
Horace Murray, whose body and clothing had been positively identified by his mother. It was a legal tactic to make the unimaginable manageable. The defense was a spectacle of blame. Sarah, the clear mastermind, pointed the finger at her weaker-willed husband, John. He was just as complicit, but she was the architect. She was the one who placed the ads, who collected the money, who managed the business. The jury saw through it. Both were found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. The public cried out for blood, for justice for the innocent lives treated as disposable commodities. But in a controversial move, John Makin's sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. He would die behind bars just a few years later, a broken man. Sarah Makin's death sentence was also commuted. She served 18 years in prison before being released, vanishing into obscurity, her ultimate fate and remorse a mystery. This flawed justice, however, sparked an undeniable fire. The sheer, systemic horror of the Makin case forced the society to look in the mirror. It exposed the festering wound of poverty, misogyny, and the brutal economics of life and death. The public outrage was so powerful it triggered immediate and lasting change. The Infant Life Protection Act of 1892 was rushed through the New South Wales Parliament. It was a direct legislative response to the crimes of Sarah Makin. For the first time, the welfare of infants in care was a matter of state concern. It laid the groundwork for the modern child protection systems we have today. So, we return to that backyard on Loomis Street. The horror is gone, buried under time and progress. But the echo remains. Sarah Makin was not a monster who lurked in the shadows. She operated in plain sight, her evil made possible by a society that looked away from its most vulnerable. Her story is not just a tale of a serial killer, but a stark lesson. It's a story about what happens when desperation is met with opportunism. About how evil can thrive in the spaces we choose not to see. The babies of Loomis Street were failed in life, but in death, their silent testimony forced a nation to build a world where such a crime could not so easily happen again. They were the forgotten, whose story we must never forget.